Today we're continuing with another oral history of important Orange County history. I've been welcomed into the home of Mrs. Margaret Phelps today. I'm Kay Crawford and have been working with the Museum of Orange County for a long time in trying to capture some oral history before somebody forgets it. And we know Mrs. Phelps has many years in this county, and she's graciously accepted our invitation to come out, our request to come out and have us in her home. Ms. Phelps, thank you again for consenting to do this today.
Well, I hope it'll be helpful.
Well, we'll do our best, won't we?
Yes, that's right.
Well, the first thing I would like to start with, just some facts about the early years of your life, where you were born, who your parents were, and about when they came to Orange County.
Well, I was born about 7 miles from Hillsborough on Highway 86. And my parents were always residents of Orange County. My dad grew up on Phelps Road, and my mother grew up on, well, she lost her mother when she was about 6 or 8 years old. She had 3 brothers, and she had to take over the cooking and whatnot and be responsible for the house. They lived in several different places, and then they married in 1902 and moved up on 86. They lived down at off 57 for a couple of years, and then bought a place up on 86 and lived there until 1945, I believe it was, that they built a house in Hillsborough because my dad had cancer and he wanted Mama to be somewhere that she could stay by herself. And he died in 1972 and Mama died in 1979.
I remember your mother. She had quite a memory for Orange County history too.
Well,
how about their parents? Did their parents live in Orange County also, your grandparents?
all of the Walkers except my granddaddy went to Canada. And Lonnie Coleman said that they were tourists and they had to go to Canada to get out away from being.
Now, does he claim to be basing that on fact, or was he trying to aggravate you?
Well, he may be right, because he's been to England and studied, and he is related to me on a mother's side. And I invited him to a reunion we had, and that's when he told me.
Well, that's a good story.
That's the reason. I know Papa said they went to Canada, but he didn't say why.
Oh, okay.
And so that might have been the reason.
Yeah. Nobody was telling, were they?
Nobody was telling. Only one that stayed here was my granddaddy. And I don't know how they escaped being taken care of, but they made it anyway.
And your mother lived to be how old?
She was 79.
She died in 79.
No, she died in 79. She was born in 80. And how old was
Does that make her 101?
No, she wasn't that old. I wrote that down somewhere. And that she was born in 1980 and died in 1959.
Okay.
And I've forgotten how, I can't do my math right fast.
Well, I'm thinking about your husband's mother. She lived to be 103. 103,
Yes.
right. Well, your family certainly has some deep roots in this county. And you hang around once you get here, I've noticed.
Well, you know, the younger people in Hillsborough, though, haven't stayed in Hillsborough.
Yes.
A lot of them have.
Right, that's right.
Now, Everett Roseman was here for his class reunion a couple of weeks ago, and there were hardly any of them who lived in Hillsborough.
They started the mass exit, the exodus from Hillsborough.
Yeah, they did. I graduated in 1933.
From
Hillsborough
High School.
Mhm.
Well, how about your parents? How much education did they have?
Well, there was a Quaker school up here,
Mhm.
and they went to Quaker school.
Was that sort of on your property?
No, it was on the Freeland property. The Freelands owned land all the way from where Betty lives to 86.
Now, which Freeland was this?
That was Mr. Johns Freeland. I don't know what his daddy's name was. And
Mr. John Freeland?
they called him Johns. I don't know how you spell it, but he was about Uncle Houston's age.
I see, okay.
And his wife was right much younger. She was a Tapp, Miss Cora Tapp. And of course, they had two children, Bill and Betty. And Betty lives at the Hung place. And that house was built before her mother and daddy married.
And you said that Mr. Freeland was about Mr. Houston's age. You mean Mr. Houston Walker?
Mhm.
I've always found that interesting how his name is pronounced, because Houston, Texas, we pronounce Houston, but
Yeah, but-
Mr. Houston was always...
Yeah, that's the way it's always
called.
been
Yeah.
pronounced.
And he was the owner of the funeral home.
That's
Now,
right.
was he a relative of yours? You were a Walker, right?
Well, he was my daddy's brother.
Your daddy's brother. He's your uncle. Well, of course you called him Uncle Houston. I thought maybe everybody in town called him
The
Uncle
oldest
Houston.
boy was named John, and he lived in Durham, worked in the cotton mill. Then Uncle Houston, and then Uncle Henry, and my daddy, and one girl, Aunt Mary Taylor, and Uncle Gene, who used to live down in the Schley community, but they moved to Burlington when farming was nil. And then Uncle Charlie was the youngest one.
Well, I remember several of your family members. They were very productive, as well as I remember. Somebody really brought you all up with some ambition. Mr. Houston owned the Walker Funeral Home.
Right.
And Mr. Charlie owned...
He was a mail carrier.
Mr. Charlie was a mail carrier. Well, didn't Mr. Henry carry mail too?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Mr. Charlie and Mr. Henry both were somewhat affiliated with the milling
That's
company,
right.
which is where my granddaddy Williams
Mhm.
worked.
Yeah, they had a part in it, they said.
Well, they certainly did a lot to get this town producing again. You know, we went through, our history shows that we went through a long period of not doing much of anything as far as making progress.
Yeah.
But those three men in particular, and you came along as a school teacher and a principal.
Well, Beulah, Uncle Houston's daughter, was a nurse.
Okay.
And
Now, were all those Walker boys, do you think they were all educated in that Quaker school?
I'm not sure. Miss Oda Bivens
Yes.
taught out there.
Okay.
Miss Agnes, she
Right.
was a forest.
Yes.
And there's a picture in one of the books of her.
Okay.
I think they must have all walked up there to the Quaker school. And then my daddy went to Orange Grove Academy, and I don't know about the others.
Do you know where Orange Grove Academy was?
Mm-hmm.
Where?
That's Orange Grove. Right there in the heart of Orange
In the heart
Grove.
of Orange Grove.
Right.
Okay.
The building stood for a long time, but it isn't any longer there.
Do you know if markers out there or anything?
I don't.
I'll have to check that out. Orange Grove Academy. There was a Hughes Academy too.
Yeah, that was over on the road to the lake that goes in
Lake
by the
Orange?
Days.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a Caldwell Academy.
What can you tell me about Caldwell Academy? Not many people know about that.
I don't know anything except what I read, but You know that house that's out there that's, oh shucks, what's the lawyer's name? And, that married, you see, I can't remember names. The commandant's house out at West Hillsboro.
Cheshire?
Cheshire.
Mhm.
It seems that that was the beginning of the Caldwell Academy.
Oh, the
Somebody-
Hillsborough Military Academy?
They had, I think they sent teachers out there, from what I have gathered, but I couldn't say for certain.
So you mean the teachers were trained at the Caldwell Academy and they went to the Hillsborough Military?
Other way
Other way around?
I think so.
Okay.
Seems to me I've read that in one of the history of Hillsborough books, but I don't know how authentic it is.
Is the Caldwell Academy the same thing as the Caldwell Institute?
It must be, I don't know.
I found a postmark on an old envelope that said Caldwell Academy. I gave it to the museum. Several people know a little bit about the Institute. I thought maybe you would know more about that.
I didn't ever know much about Caldwell.
Yeah.
We didn't get down that way.
I guess we'll have to do an interview with somebody out in Caldwell and get those
all of them
stories.
are gone, all the older people.
Older people.
Lois Blalock
Yeah.
was one of the ones that knew more about it than
Right.
probably anybody else. They had a school, a grammar school, and then they had a high school for a while.
Let me get back to your family a little bit. Tell me all the siblings you had. Who were they?
My Sybil Roseman
Sybil Roseman,
and Harold Walker.
Harold Walker. And you, were
And I was in the middle.
you were in the middle?
Sybil
Okay.
was 9.5 years older than I.
Now, when you were growing up, tell me again where the family lived.
We lived out on 86. There's a Mount Zion colored church up there. We
Right.
lived right below that.
Okay.
Barney Pittman bought the place finally. Robert Nichols bought it from my daddy, and then Barney Pittman had his flowers there for
Oh,
a
yeah.
long time.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's going on there now. But my daddy, they moved in an old house, well-built old house, had beautiful mantels. And there was a little building out in the yard that didn't have a floor in it, and that's where they did the cooking. Had one big room
The cookhouse.
and one small room. It had an upstairs to it. It was a well-built, I have no idea how old the house was. And then they moved that, they lived there until my daddy built the house that we lived in when I was born. I think Sybil was born in the new house also,
It's all still on the same property.
all still on the same property. That's right. And I don't know who owns it now, for certain.
Now, when you first started to school, did you come into Hillsborough?
No, it was a school before you get to Kennedy's.
Packing house?
It was a one-room school, and it sat on the other side of the road from where it is now. It's been made into a residence. When you go Phelps Road and turn right, and it's that little building that sits back off the road
On 86?
on 86. It's
Okay.
Ridge Road School. That was down the road farther, there was a Ridge Road Black School.
Oh, okay. Ridge Road White School and Ridge Road Black School. Both were on Highway 86, just beyond John Thomas Walker's
Well,
store.
back this way.
Back this side of
Yeah,
town.
it's the
The
first
Hillsborough
building.
side.
That's right,
Yeah.
first building after you turn. The black school was on down at the Huff Hines Hill, they call it. And we walked, it's almost 2 miles from where I lived to school.
I never heard anybody use the Huffines name down here. My mother was a Huffines.
Well, Mr. Okay, so I can't even call the name now. The Huffines woman lived up beyond Burlington, and she had some land over. The man that lived here divided his land between Michael. I don't know what his given name was. He had a son, John Michael, and he got the place that Leroy Miller lived on. And then Arthur Michael, for whom the lake up in Mebane is named.
Oh, Lake Michael.
He had this place, and the sister, Miss Huffines, had the land over across the road. And Leroy bought that several years ago.
Across the road from where we're at today, at your house?
Mm-hmm, it's right
Okay.
in the field over there.
Okay. Well, that's interesting information I had no idea about.
Now, I don't know the name of the man, Huffines, but they had a store up there. It's long gone, but there was a spring that they said was mineral spring. And the Huffines went down to that spring and built a concrete wall all around and let the water come out and go on. And that was one place that people went for picnics because it was sunny. I mean shady.
Shady.
And there was a nice grove there and water.
Cool.
So the Huffines area furnished a place for people to go.
Well, let me go back to that first house you lived in on Highway 86. Do you remember when you got electricity and plumbing? About how old you might have been?
Well, Duke Powell said that if they would find a certain number of people who would buy an electric stove or refrigerator, that they would run the line out there. And it stopped at our house. We bought a refrigerator, and the Kennedys bought a stove, and the other people, I think there were supposed to be 5 appliances, and they would, and the minimum then was 80 cents a month.
Now, what was Mr. Kennedy's first name?
GC.
GC. Okay.
I don't know whether.
That's enough. I can track him down with those initials. But his family opened the packing company.
That's right.
Kennedy Packing Company.
He married twice. His first wife I didn't ever know. And he had Roy Kennedy, was my sister's age, and Louis and Lee.
Right.
And then he married Miss Minnie, and there was Glenn, who was killed in service,
Right.
and Everett, and Marie.
Big family.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting story about electricity coming. Do you remember when your family got its first automobile?
Well, it was a Model T, and it must have been, it wasn't a new one. It must have been about 17 or 18. I don't remember ever riding to church in a buggy.
Yeah. So, what year were you born in?
1915.
1915. So, your family had, your earliest memories, your family had a car,
Right.
the Model T. Well, that was one of the first cars around here, so they hadn't had it all that long, I don't guess.
No. We had to use side curtains to keep from freezing in the winter.
And I guess the tractor came along about the same time, maybe even earlier.
Well, there were tractors, I don't know, but I must have been about 7 or 8 years old when my daddy bought the first tractor. It was a used one. It was an 816, I believe they called it. It had the front wheels were wide, and it crawled.
Did you get to ride on the tractor some?
Oh, I drove it
You
some.
drove it. You were just a
You
young
put
girl.
this wheel right on the furrow, and he'd get off and go get a drink of water, and then Harold and I always had to race. I mean, one couldn't do more than the other. If he drove to church, I had to drive home.
Yeah. Sibling rivalry.
And